toxic standards go into effect?
My point.
No, this is really important.
Standard was successful.
When did the 2024 standards go into effect?
To lead more.
Did they go into effect yet?
Look, the point here is the amount.
Are you aware that the 2024 Mercury and air toxic standards didn't even go into effect yet?
You are being so combative because you don't have the information. Because you're not.
I don't have. I'm asking you a simple question. You don't even know that it didn't go into effect yet.
Which is how many folks
math.
are going to be
You won't even tell me
harmed.
where you're getting your math from.
I'm telling you.
Okay, you're telling.
Welcome back to Freedom Forge. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications because we break down the biggest political showdowns in Washington from a perspective the mainstream media refuses to give you. Today, we're reacting to a heated Senate hearing focused on EPA mercury regulations, coal plants, energy policy, and the ongoing war between environmental activists and America's energy independence. This hearing quickly turned into a fiery clash over whether stricter mercury standards are really about protecting public health or about forcing coal plants out of existence altogether.
The better, because we're getting ready to do our markup. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Administrator, for being here. I wanted to talk about mercury. You know that mercury is a very dangerous pollutant. It leads to cognitive challenges for kids their entire lives. The developmental delays that even a trace amount of mercury poisoning can lead to make kids slower to speak, slower to walk. It follows them forever. One of the decisions that the EPA made under your leadership was to repeal higher mercury and air toxic standards. Tell me a little bit about why you did that, and specifically why you left out the health impacts in that analysis.
So you're referring to the 2024 mercury and air toxic standards. We kept in place the strict 2012 mercury and air toxic standards that were working. There was a targeted effort towards the end of the Biden administration through a number of rules to try to tell coal miners that they should learn to code and to try to make coal plants across this country shut down. Steam electric ELG, coal combustion residual, Clean Power Plan 2.0, the 2024 mercury and air toxic standards collectively, there were coal plants all across the entire country that were targeted for extinction because of it, and now they're able to stay open. Coal and natural gas, they provide these power plants.
Just to refocus, specifically, why did your analysis of the impacts of this repeal not include the health impacts to the populations that are going to bear this increased mercury pollution?
Oh, we absolutely consider the health impacts of mercury.
There was no quantified health impact in that analysis. Am I mistaken?
We absolutely value the impact. The whole reason why we have mercury and air toxic standards in the first place is because of the health impacts of mercury and air toxic standards. So,
but in the repeal, how much do you think it's actually going to? What are the health harms of this repeal?
Could be zero.
You think doubling the amount of mercury pollution in the air is going to lead to zero health harms?
Where did you get doubling from?
That's the impact of the repeal.
No, where did you get it from? The
from
doubling.
2024 to the 2012 standards. You mentioned that you're going back to the 2012 standards.
Where's your math from? Here we go. I'm not Secretary Kennedy. I watched your hearing with him last week.
It is 70% higher. The standards from 2024 are 70% higher than the standards from 2012.
So it is your position as I sit here today, we're about to do this because you're going to regret it. We're about to do this where your position is that we are doubling the amount of mercury.
That you are allowing 70% higher mercury standards.
Yeah, no. So I'm allowing 70%. Now I'm saying 70. Now you're saying 70%.
Repeal the standard that had 70% stricter standards, the 2024 standard, than the 2012 standard.
So the nationwide
Do you not
tons.
understand the math behind this? I'm confused.
Here we go. The nationwide tons of mercury emissions from coal plants, if the MATS 2024 was still in place, from 2028 to 2037 was 33.2. The nationwide tons of mercury emissions from coal plants, if mercury and air toxic standards was repealed from 2028 to 2037, is 39.3 at most. That's assuming that no coal plant at all will voluntarily take any action whatsoever to install any control devices. So at most, the math ends up being 15.5 to 18.3%, which is significantly less than double.
The estimates that I've seen are as much as 1,500 additional pounds of mercury in the air.
Rip it up. Have your dog pee on it. It's just not accurate.
Can you quantify the health impacts of the increased mercury pollution that are going to be allowed in the air because of this EPA standard?
You understand that the 2012 mercury and air toxic
I'm talking about
standards,
the repeal of the 2024 standards.
the 2021,
What is the health impacts of these standards? Because they were left out of the EPA
Sure.
report.
2021 mercury emissions from coal-fired EGUs were 90% lower than pre-MATS levels. Since 2010, acid gas, hazardous air
I'm not
pollution
asking about
emissions
since 2010,
have
sir.
been reduced, but this is the last time that we have the number.
Okay,
I'm
I'll
sorry.
give you the answer. I'll give you
It
the
does
answer.
not. It does not exist. So after 2021 is the last year.
In your opening statement, you cited an estimate for how much you think the compliance benefits, how much the savings of this are going to be.
Yes.
And I think it's quite interesting that
670 million.
your citation of the savings impact, the compliance cost to the coal power plants, is so precise, but the impacts of the harms to the kids that are going to actually bear this mercury pollution seems a little vague. Let me help you out. This decision is going to lead to 1,500 pounds of increased mercury
That's not
in the
accurate.
air. Okay, 1,500 pounds of increased, up to 1,500 pounds of increased mercury in the air. Now, that's going to lead to about $1 million per pound of cost, about $1.5 billion impact on our health system, disproportionately faced by pregnant women and kids who are actually dealing with this mercury poisoning, far outweighing the compliance benefits that you cited.
Yeah, your numbers just aren't accurate.
Tell me your numbers. I asked for your numbers.
I just did.
What are the health impacts of this repeal?
Okay, the 2021 mercury and air toxic emissions, the last year that the agency has from coal-fired EGUs, were 90% lower than pre-MATS levels. Now, is it when do you think
they were 90% lower
the
because of the 2012 standard?
Okay, the 2024 mercury and air toxic standards. When is what is your understanding of when that went into effect?
My point is
No. When do you?
2012
It's the whole. It's important for your question and your math. When did the 2024 mercury and air toxic standards go into effect?
My point.
No, this is really
12
important.
standard was successful.
When did the
Your repeal of
2024 standards go into
standard is going
effect?
to lead more.
Did they go into effect yet?
Look, the point here is the amount.
Are you aware that the 2024 mercury and
I'm
air
asking the
toxic
question,
standards didn't even go
Administrator.
into effect yet?
You are being so combative because you don't have the information. Because you're not.
I don't have. I'm asking you a simple question.
I
You don't
asked
even
you
know
a
that it
very
didn't go into
simple
effect
question,
yet.
which is how
You're making
many
up
folks
math.
are going
You won't
to
even
be
tell me
harmed.
where you're getting your math from.
I'm telling you.
Okay, you're telling me. Tell me. Where'd you get your math from? 1,500, you say, is the increase. Where'd you get it from?
Up to 1,500 increased
Yeah,
pounds, which are by.
where'd you get it from? Where's your source? My source
is my
comes from
source?
career staffers who have been working selflessly inside of the
My
federal
source is the
government
communities
for
that are
20
gonna
years.
be impacted by this increased pollution.
Sources
I don't want to
in the
get in a.
community.
I don't want to get into debate here. I just wanted to ask a simple question of who's going to be hurt.
No,
by this
last
repeal.
week you were calling
I think the answer
Secretary
that I
Kennedy.
heard-
You're saying that he was a coward because
have
he
no
didn't
idea.
know the answer. Whoa,
point is,
whoa is
you have no
right.
idea.
I felt the same way when he was talking to Secretary Kennedy like that. Yeah. So
All right.
you don't know that it didn't go into effect yet.
My
You're
point
making up a
is-
number of 1,500 that's not accurate. I'm asking where your source is. My source is
All right.
coming from career staffers. Yours is coming from some mysterious people in the community.
the folks that are going to be harmed by your decision. I yield back, sir. I'm not
These
interested in getting
mysterious
into debate
people.
here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr.
And honestly, what stood out most to me wasn't just the policy debate. It was the attitude. It was the political theater. And it was another perfect example of how many politicians in Washington already have their conclusions made up before the hearing even begins. The exchange started with accusations that repealing the Biden-era 2024 Mercury standards would supposedly expose Americans, especially children, to dangerous pollution. Now let's be clear here. Nobody is arguing that mercury pollution is good. Nobody wants poison air or unsafe communities. That's not the issue. The real issue is whether these regulations are being weaponized to destroy industries that millions of Americans still rely on for affordable and reliable energy. The EPA administrator made an important point that the media conveniently ignores all the time. The 2012 mercury and air toxic standards are still in place. Those standards already caused emissions from coal plants to drop dramatically over the last decade. According to the testimony, mercury emissions were already about 90% lower than pre-MATS levels. That's not a tiny improvement. That's massive. But apparently for the climate activists and anti-fossil fuel politicians, that's still not enough. What we're seeing now is a push for increasingly extreme regulations designed less to improve health outcomes and more to force coal plants into extinction. And the EPA administrator outright said it during the hearing. He argued that several Biden-era rules collectively targeted coal plants across America and basically told coal workers to learn to code. That line matters because it perfectly captures the elitist attitude many Americans are tired of hearing. These are real jobs, real families, real communities. Washington politicians sit in air-conditioned offices talking about transitioning industries, while regular Americans worry about paying electric bills, keeping food on the table, and surviving inflation that's already crushing the middle class. And here's another thing that bothered me during this hearing. The senator kept throwing around dramatic numbers like doubling mercury pollution and 1,500 additional pounds of mercury, while the administrator kept asking one very basic question. Where exactly is this math coming from? And honestly, that's a fair question. If you're going to accuse an administration of poisoning children and causing billions in health damages, you better come prepared with hard evidence, transparent calculations, and verifiable data. Instead, what do we hear? Career staffers told me. That's not convincing. That's not scientific rigor. That's political grandstanding. What really exposed the weakness in the argument was when the administrator pointed out something extremely important. The 2024 standards hadn't even fully gone into effect yet. Think about that for a second. They were making sweeping claims about catastrophic harm based on standards that weren't even operational yet. That changes the entire conversation, because now the debate becomes less about actual measured harm and more about projected activist scenarios designed to scare the public. And this is where conservatives need to pay attention. There's a growing pattern in Washington where fear becomes the tool used to justify almost unlimited federal power. Fear about climate, fear about pollution, fear about energy, fear about public health. And every single time, the solution somehow ends up being more regulations, more bureaucracy, higher costs, and less American energy production. Meanwhile, China keeps building coal plants. India keeps building coal plants. But somehow American workers are supposed to sacrifice their livelihoods while the rest of the world keeps expanding energy production. That's not environmental leadership. That's economic surrender. And let's talk about reliability for a minute, because this matters. Coal and natural gas still provide enormous amounts of reliable baseload power in this country. When the wind stops blowing and the sun isn't shining, Americans still expect their lights to turn on. Hospitals still need electricity. Factories still need power. Families still need heat and air conditioning. The people pushing these aggressive regulations rarely talk about what happens if reliable energy disappears faster than replacement infrastructure can realistically handle. We've already seen energy crises happen around the world when governments move too fast with ideological energy policies. Higher utility bills, rolling blackouts, grid instability, and ordinary citizens are always the ones who suffer first. What also stood out in this hearing was how combative the exchange became. The senator clearly came in ready for a fight, and the administrator eventually pushed back hard. At one point, he basically accused the senator of using inaccurate math and politically charged talking points instead of facts. Now, whether you agree with him or not, you can understand why frustration builds when accusations are made without clear sourcing. And honestly, this is part of the bigger problem with modern hearings in Washington. Too many of them are no longer about finding truth. They're about viral clips. They're about getting a dramatic moment for social media. Politicians interrupt each other, talk over each other, and perform for the cameras instead of seriously debating policy. But underneath all the yelling, there's still a very important debate happening here. How do we balance environmental protection with economic survival? How do we protect public health without destroying energy affordability? How do we avoid becoming dependent on foreign energy or unstable grids while still reducing pollution responsibly? Those are legitimate questions, and conservatives are not anti-environment for asking them. Wanting affordable electricity doesn't make someone evil. Wanting American energy independence doesn't make someone anti-science. Wanting realistic timelines and practical solutions instead of ideological mandates is not extremism. In fact, I'd argue it's common sense. Because regular Americans are exhausted with policies that sound good in elite conferences but end up making life harder for working families. And the most revealing moment in this hearing might have been when the administrator said the existing standards were already working. That's the part many people ignore. Emissions were already massively reduced before these newer rules even came into play. So the question becomes, at what point does environmental regulation stop being about reasonable protection and start becoming about total elimination of entire industries? That's the real debate. And I think millions of Americans already know the answer. This wasn't just a hearing about Mercury. This was another front in the larger battle over America's future. Energy independence versus energy dependence, economic realism versus ideological activism, and whether Washington bureaucrats should have the power to decide which industries live or die. And I'll say this plainly. America cannot stay strong if we intentionally cripple the industries that power our economy while our global competitors keep expanding theirs. That's not leadership. That's self-inflicted weakness. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more real talk about what's happening in Washington, make sure you like this video, subscribe to Freedom Forge, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think these EPA regulations are necessary protections for public health, or are they part of a broader political war against American energy production? I want to hear what you think.